or never mind the long term? Keyshawn, J. Will Zubin, presented by Progressive Insurance. Good question there by Greeny on one shade of green as we talk about another shade of green here in just a second, Jay.
But Doug Peterson, let me turn my mic on.
Yes,
that works better.
That would be helpful.
Doug Peterson is still reviewing the tape to determine who he wants to start.
Right.
Just saying.
Common sense here, Key. Common sense, often not common.
He'll name the starter tomorrow.
Yeah, you got to get there Wednesday. Yeah. Game plans going in.
I had to think Tuesday because I have Monday Night Football, Tuesday Night Football, Cowboys, Baltimore. Tomorrow he'll name the starter after he looks at the tape tonight.
Looks at the tape.
Yeah. Wednesday, starter.
Presumably, we'll hear Jalen Hurts as a starter tomorrow. I don't think.
Or he may do the college thing. Don't say anything up until kickoff.
Right. Make the DC prep for both guys. Even though, in college, is it going to be Trevor Lawrence or some? No, I think we'll prep for Trevor Lawrence. I think that's probably the way we should probably go. This is Keyshawn, J. Will, and Zubin coming to you live from above the Heineken River Deck at Pier 17. Again, more on Doug Peterson and the Kelly Green Eagles in just a bit. But this is the gangrene New York Jets we'll start with our ESPN NFL insider, Dan Graziano, who joins us this morning on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Dan, good morning. A few minutes ago, the fellas reeled off who they thought might be in the mix to get this head coaching job if and when it becomes open. I don't want to fire a guy that hasn't been fired yet, but I think we kind of know what direction this is going. I don't think
Did you see Dan's face? What a great face, Dan.
Still employed at the moment at 7:02 a.m. Eastern time on Tuesday.
Who could be in the
mix here? Who could be in the mix here for the Jets once this Adam Gase tenure is over?
Look, I mean, you hear a lot of the similar names that you've heard in years past in terms of Eric Bieniemy. I mean, Brian Daboll in Buffalo is put a nice little audition tape together last night. These guys are going to get interviews. If you look at where the Jets are, if they're going to be picking number one, if they're going to be taking Trevor Lawrence, they're probably going to be looking for a coach, that they feel can sort of shepherd Trevor Lawrence into his NFL career. And that probably means an offensive guy, even though it's not the best idea to approach your coaching situation that way. Do we want offense? Do we want defense? You want actually someone who's a leader that can maybe even delegate that responsibility. But look, I mean, there are Jim Harbaugh rumors that bubble up around the Jets. Jim Harbaugh rumors every year this time. We still don't know what he wants to do. He's an interesting guy for NFL teams if he decides he wants to go back into the pros because his record as an NFL head coach was outstanding. And I think there are people that want to see if he could pull that off again. And then I found it really interesting. Our Jets reporter, Rich Cimini, in his Sunday notebook this week, a couple days ago, raised the possibility that they would pursue Doug Peterson if the Eagles decided to move on from him or if they could work out a trade. Joe Douglas, the Jets GM, worked with Peterson there in Philadelphia for a couple of years, so there's a connection. So, look, I mean, it's early to know for sure, but the Jets are certainly thinking that way. I think it's fair to assume.
Dan, let me ask you this, though, not just for me, but also for the Philadelphia Eagle fans, and you've been covering this thing from day one. What the hell happened to the Eagles this year?
They didn't have the roster they thought they'd have, right? I mean, like they put together a roster that was based around like speed in the passing game, and you bring back Deshaun Jackson, you draft Jalen Reagor, and you think, but look, I mean, I hate to be the boring guy when this happens, but so often the answer to these questions is the offensive line, right? I mean, they lose key starters on the offensive line in the preseason. They can't keep it together all year. Lane Johnson's in and out of the lineup. You look around the league. Like, why aren't the Ravens as good as last year? Well, Marshall Yanda retired and Ronnie Stanley got hurt. Well, what's going on in Cleveland? Why are they so good? Well, look what happened on the offensive line. They bolstered it at the tackle positions. They hired Bill Callahan to coach it. They kept it healthy. It very often comes back to that. And I'm not saying that's the Eagles' only problem, but it's certainly the foundation of what went wrong for them on offense. We came into this year saying injuries with the Eagles. Can they overcome this? If they do, it's because the head coach and the quarterback delivered on a high level, and neither one of them did. So they had a big challenge coming into this year in terms of their injuries. They did not have a big challenge in terms of the division. They could be 6-6 right now and be in first place. So that wasn't that difficult. But it's been a disappointing year in those two key spots for the Eagles, head coach and quarterback, where they thought they were solid.
You have a very successful column that you dive into every single weekend or every single week, the overreaction, and you said that the Giants in making the playoffs, that they would be a tough out. Why is that?
I think I'm going to add Washington now after yesterday and say whoever the NFC East champion is, right? Like we've been making fun of this division all year and with good reason, but the Giants just went into Seattle and won. Washington just went into Pittsburgh and won. Like those are playoff teams, right? Seattle and Pittsburgh. Those are teams that you could see making the Super Bowl, and these teams just beat them. Look, they play defense, and there hasn't been a ton of that in the NFL this year. But the Giants on defense confused Russell Wilson and the Seattle Seahawks and held them to 12 points on Sunday in their building. That is no small feat. And look, I'm not saying these are world beaters. I don't expect an 07 or 2011 style Giants Super Bowl run out of this group. I think they're still putting it together in terms of their long-term prospects. But I don't think they're going to be an enjoyable team to play come January. And I think you saw that on Sunday, and it's because they come in with a plan, they execute it, the players are buying into what the coaching staff is selling, and they're feeling very good about themselves. Look, we see hot teams make noise in the playoffs, even if they aren't necessarily the best teams. Giants have won 4 in a row. If they keep this going and they go into the playoffs hot, yeah. I mean, how could you say they can't upset a team like Seattle with a home playoff game in the first round when they just went in there to Seattle? When Seattle's in a tight division race, it's not like they took them lightly and won the game. I think it's interesting to see these teams develop as possibly legit problems for the big teams come January.
Dan, you also said that it's an overreaction to have the Patriots make the playoffs. What's stopping them?
Math. I mean, they're 6-6, right? And the Colts right now, I think the Colts are the 7th seed in the AFC. They're 8-4. So you got to make up 2 games, and you got 4 games left. And there are other teams in between you and the Colts. So I just think it's too tough a hill to climb right now in terms of the standings. You could get, if you're the Patriots, you could win 9 or 10 games this year and still miss. So they've put themselves behind the 8 ball. They need a lot of help. They need other teams to play badly that are in front of them right now, and they need to keep winning. It's really weird. Remember the last time the Patriots missed the playoffs was 2008. They were 11-5 and somehow missed the playoffs that year. So you could have a similar situation here where they end up with a winning record but still on the outside looking in because of that rotten stretch they had back in October where they couldn't score any points.
Okay, let me ask you this before we let you go, Dan. What's going to happen in Chicago? Do you think that they're going to blow Nagy out at the end of the season?
I'll say this: if he doesn't win any more games, yeah, I think that's certainly going to happen. And honestly, I think he's in a lot more peril than I would have thought a month ago. Which, I mean, you know, these long losing streaks in the middle of the season certainly do that to you. You start 5-1, now you're 5-7. Yeah, I think it's possible. That's a situation we're definitely watching at this point in terms of a potential opening at head coach and maybe GM. I mean, remember, Ryan Pace is the one that traded up to draft Mitchell Trubisky when Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes were on the board. So at some point, you know, you have to wear that decision. So, yeah, that's a situation that's gone very badly here over the last 6-7 weeks, and I think it's entirely possible Chicago joins the ranks of teams that are looking for a new head coach in, now 4 weeks?
Indeed, their record may not show it, but Houston is the Bears' next opponent. They're dangerous just because of the work that Watson has been able to do, sans weapons. That's next up for the Bears. Dan, thank you very much.
You got it.
Thank you. Keyshawn J. Will has been presented by Progressive Insurance. Drivers who save with Progressive save over $750 on average. Dan joined us on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. On the way, after the Steelers' first loss of the season, where do they fall in Key's real rankings?
Uh-oh.
Key unveils that next on ESPN Radio. Go for